1. I don't know about this, Tadashi. Tadashi Yamaguchi put the car in park and turned toward Kei. We've talked about this. It's the best way to get what you want. And to keep what I have. I know. You've mentioned it at least 1,000 times. Kei Tsukihina shook his head in disbelief. He'd been doing that a lot lately. Ever since he decided to entertain Tadashi's ridiculous idea. Tadashi reached for Kei's hand and gave it a little squeeze. Besides, he's perfect. He beamed with pride. I've completely outdone myself. Kei pulled his hand back and turned away in a dramatic huff. How do you manage to be the publicist who gives all the other publicists a bad name? Do you know how hard that is? Tadashi gave him an insincere shrug. What can I say? I'm a winner. Kei lowered his glasses and shot him a glare. I'm serious, Tadashi. I really don't want to do this. Just give me 5 minutes. I haven't even told you about him yet. Tadashi unrolled Kei's heavily tinted window. The anticipation was killing him. He had to know what Kei would think of his choice for him. The one at the end. With the short brunette hair. Damn it, Ta. Kei froze. His mouth hanging open. Tadashi wanted to laugh out loud at Kei's reaction, but he covered it up with a clearing of his throat. If he wasn't sure before, and by God he wasn't. He certainly was now. Kei Tsukihina was indeed gay. He leaned over and looked out the car window with him. I expect a week at your Aspen condo. Peak season. No freaking late April. That's just insulting. Kei kept his eyes on the guy. Remind me again why I have to pay your retainer and give you my condo in exchange for carrying out your dumbass idea. Because I'm that good. Tadashi grinned, entirely too pleased with himself. Now then, would you like the lowdown? Before you go down, late April, just for that, maybe even May, and here I thought we were friends. Tadashi put on his reading glasses and opened a file folder. His name is Shoyo Hinata, 30 years old. Lives in New York. New York? Then why is he sitting at a Starbucks in West Hollywood? He comes here every day. Gets him out of that shitty little hotel he's staying in. Now, can I give you his history without any more interruptions, please? Kei waved a dismissive hand while he kept his eyes on the brunette. Please do. We both have better places to be. He came up in the business. Spent his childhood on a daytime soap. Went to college. Then back on the soap. Left the show last year. So he's in LA. Going to every audition he can. He really needs the work. Any luck? He's good, Kei. He has a couple of daytime Emmys. But nothing so far. I've never heard of him. Kei looked impatiently at his watch. Does it matter? And by the way, anyone who watches soaps would know who he is. So, he's like this generation's Cameron Matheson? Tadashi chuckled. So, you do watch soaps. You know me better than that, Tadashi. He closed the folder and opened his iPad. Shall we YouTube him? No. Just tell me about his love life. Kei glanced at his watch again and then lowered the car window a bit more. Broke up with his ex about 6 months ago. Word is, the stress of coming out was too much for them. Kei stilled himself and slowly turned to Tadashi. Glancing at him quickly before slowly turning to the window again. Looking at the guy up and down. His eyes widened. He's gay? Tadashi smiled, feeling so very proud of himself. Perfect, right? Kei didn't reply. Kei? Kei gave him a nod. Okay, I'll need a face-to-face before we make an offer. Well, as you can see, he's alone. Just don't get into any specifics until we have a signed non-disclosure agreement. Great. I was ready to open with, hey, good lookin'. Want to hear my publicist's half-cocked plan? Now I need another pickup line. Cockblocker by day, publicist by night. Just doing my job. Kei shot him an indignant glare, then looked away. I don't know, Tadashi. I'm having second thoughts about this. Kei. He put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. How many times have you told me you can't do this alone? His tough publicist facade gave way to the face of a friend. Because the truth was, he and Kei were friends. Kei trusted him more than anyone else in the business, and with good reason. Tadashi'd been by his side through a very tough time. The last thing Tadashi wanted to do was break that trust. You've always said you need someone on your arm when you announce it to the world. Always? I mentioned it once after 2 glasses of wine. I might add. And then you came up with this crazy idea. It's not crazy. It's smart. This way we control it. And the publicist was back, pushing every one of Kay's buttons. We control the whole thing. And nobody loses anything. Kay shook his head in disgust. I can't believe I have to do this. I mean seriously, I still can't believe you're gay. And neither will the rest of the world. They'll think it's some sort of stunt to boost ratings. And then they'll hound you relentlessly until they get a photo of your boyfriend. So forget about dating for real. Kay, no man is willing to put himself through that. Not even for you. So, what you're telling me is, I have to live a lie. Or the world won't believe me? Tadashi reached across Kay and opened the door. Welcome to show business. No, Dad. Nothing yet. Shoyo rubbed his forehead. These daily phone calls from his father were getting tedious. Yes. I used the security bar on my door. He sighed. Dad. I grew up in New York. I think I can handle LA. His eyes widened in surprise as he tracked a man who had just made himself at home at the table. Dad. I have to go. Talk soon. Love you. Sorry for interrupting. I hope this seat isn't taken. Shoyo slowly shook his head. No. He'd had soap fans insinuate themselves into his personal space before. Usually to praise him for standing up to that TV wife of his. Or because they desperately wanted to give him advice on how the storyline should go. As if he had any control over that sort of thing. But this time, Shoyo was pretty sure he was looking at Leo Hardin. No, not Leo Hardin. That was his character's name on the show. He was looking at Kei Tsukishima. Why the hell had Kei Tsukishima just plopped down at his table? Was he a soap fan? Shoyo reached across the table and took the offered hand. Shoyo Hinata. Actor? Kei pointed at Shoyo's iPad. I noticed you're looking for auditions. So, not a fan. Apparently. Then again, no one was anymore. 2 more rejections this morning had cemented that fact. Shoyo tossed the iPad on the table. Yeah, I guess I am. There was a tinge of frustration in his voice. Anything interesting? Absolutely not. A damn thing. Shoyo answered, frowning. Sorry. It's tough out there right now. Not that you would know. Shoyo leaned back in his chair. It was a small table and he felt the need to regain some of his personal space. I got lucky 5 years ago. I was in the right place. At the right time and I got the gig of a lifetime. I'll deny it if you quote me. I tell the whole world how hard it is but it's mostly luck. Oh, well that's great news. Shoyo sarcastically threw his hands in the air. And here I was, thinking that owning the 10 o'clock slot on Thursday nights had something to do with talent. Was it really all about luck? Had Shoyo been working hard every day, honing his craft, becoming the best at what he did, only to be told it all came down to fucking luck? Kei's smile brightened. I take it you watch Leo's Appeal. Hell no. Shoyo didn't watch the show. Why would he watch the man his ex-boyfriend fawned over every Thursday night? Yeah, they would joke about Tobio's crush. But it irritated Shoyo more than anything else. Especially since Tobio couldn't ever seem to find the time to watch Shoyo's show. But saying that out loud didn't seem appropriate. My ex watched it. Religiously. I see. And what about you? What do you think of the show? Shoyo shrugged. Honestly, I was memorizing my lines while he watched. But he thinks you're amazing. He huffed out a breath. Wishing he hadn't said the last part. Tobio and his damn celebrity crushes. They were never men who looked anything like Shoyo. Always blonde. California guys. Tobio had a type. Jesus. Why hadn't Shoyo ever figured that out until right now? Kei pushed his sunglasses up to the top of his head, giving Shoyo a close-up view of those ice blue eyes he was so famous for. Will you tell the network that? I keep asking for a raise and they keep shooting me down. Kei joked. Shoyo smirked. What? From 1 million per episode to 2? I'm sure you're doing just fine. Kei's eyes widened in surprise. Am I really sitting here arguing with a stranger about my pay? Shoyo leaned forward and picked up his cup of coffee. I introduced myself. Shoyo Hinata. Remember? He took a sip and held the cup close to his mouth, peering at Kei over his cup. How could I forget? Kei picked up the coffee he'd ordered before sitting down at the table. He took a sip and they stared at each other for a few long seconds. Now that we've established how unfair the business is. I'm sorry, Shoyo interrupted. I guess I'm a little bit bitter about the huge pay gap between daytime and primetime actors. Shoyo was bitter about a lot of things, and sitting here looking at Kei Tsukihina wasn't helping. The man had it all. A great career, a great marriage to some other A-lister, enough money to last him 2 lifetimes. Shoyo guessed. And yet, here he sat, flirting with those blue eyes like there was no tomorrow. With a total stranger, a male stranger. Shoyo glanced around, wondering if he was being punked. Look, it's like I said before. It's all about the right place at the right time. Which is a perfect segue into asking you if you like to come to a party at my place tonight. I could introduce you to some industry people. Because it's also about who you know. And now you know me. So, Shoyo's brows knitted as he folded his arms. Weird. What's weird? I'm a New Yorker. I don't take people at face value, and this is weird. He glanced around again. Kei glanced around too. What are you doing? Looking for hidden cameras, Shoyo said with all seriousness. Kei leaned back and laughed. Few people were famous for their laugh. Kei was one of the few. It wasn't a laugh that you heard across a crowded room. It was a little subtler than that. But it made you want to laugh right along with him. Even if you hadn't heard the joke. I promise there are no hidden cameras. Well, paparazzi maybe. But not like one of those hidden camera shows. So, can I ask, what do you find weird about this? Shoyo leaned forward and lowered his voice. Well, for one thing, I'm getting a gay vibe from Kei Tsukihina, who everybody knows is married to. Shoyo looked away for a second. God, what's her name? Divorced. We're divorced. Really? Shoyo was genuinely surprised. Not that he kept up with celebrity gossip. That was more Tobio's thing. But he never mentioned that his celebrity crush had gotten a divorce. I guess I should read the tabloids more often. Kei chuckled. Well, if you read those you'd know that the divorce was due to the fact that I don't want kids. He put up his finger. Oh, and also, I was too short for her. Wow, that sucks. Shoyo was still leaning forward on the table. Their eyes locked on each other for a few seconds. When was the last time you plopped down at someone's table in West Hollywood? I don't make a habit of it. And you can question the weirdness of it all day long since you have so much time on your hands. Or you can graciously accept the invitation to my party tonight. He grabbed a napkin and quickly wrote down the address and slid it across the table, smiling. See you later. Without waiting for an answer, Kei stood. Before he could make it out of Starbucks, someone stopped him, wanting a selfie and an autograph. He gave the woman both and turned back around. Shoyo was staring at him with his arms folded, looking rather perplexed. Kei gave him a little wave and left. Tadashi opened the door from inside the car and Kei slid into the passenger seat. Well, how did it go? You're right. He's gorgeous. Tadashi grinned. I knew you'd think so. Brunette. Big brown eyes and an amazing smile. Okay, settle down there. Kei watched Shoyo collect his things and get up to leave. He's not a fan, but I kind of like that. He didn't fawn over you? Kei almost snorted. I'd say it was the exact opposite of fawning. Hey, as long as the camera likes the two of you. Tadashi handed his camera over to Kei. I took a few shots. The blonde and brunette thing is killer. You already look like a couple. He's even scowling at you in one of the shots. Kei scrolled through the photos. And sure enough, Tadashi was right. They did look good together. We'll see how it goes tonight. He might not even show up. Oh, he'll show up. He'd be a fool not to. Kei handed the camera back and looked out the window just in time to see Shoyo walking down the sidewalk to his car. Kei couldn't help but smile. Because, god damn, Shoyo Hinata had it all in the looks department. And truth be told, Kei Tsukihina had a thing for brunettes. Good work, Tadashi. Finally, the praise Tadashi knew he deserved. My wife says President's Day would be great. For what? Aspen. Kei shook his head at him for the 100th time. Tadashi was nothing if not pushy. Fine. Tell Yachi to pencil you in. He raised his window and rested his head on the back of the leather seat. That's if this doesn't blow up in my face before then. 2. Shoyo stood in front of the huge wooden door wondering where the hell the doorbell was. It was one of those ultra-modern homes where all the essentials like light switches and the damn handle to flush the toilet were hidden. He'd been in a home like that in New York. Some unnecessary party he and the rest of the cast had been invited to. Needless to say, that particular toilet went unflushed. And why did he have to find the doorbell anyway? Kei had already let him through the security gate. He was probably watching him on a security camera from inside the house. Shoyo pounded on the door. He considered flipping off the camera on the overhang with his spare hand, but he thought better of it. Kei opened the door with a smile. Hi. Shoyo pushed his hands into his pockets. Feeling awkward and slightly annoyed, he forced himself to smile back. Hi. Kei opened the door wider. Come in. Shoyo took a quick look around but didn't see any other guests. Either I'm early or this isn't a party at all. A party of 3. You, me, and if things go well, eventually my publicist. Shoyo spun around. So I was right when we met this morning? Which part? Kei led Shoyo into a meticulously decorated room. A long white sofa faced floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a large swimming pool. As living rooms go, this was a blatant display of wealth. Shoyo wasn't impressed. And even if he was, he'd never admit it. He'd met a few A-list actors in his time and rarely did he come away believing they were anything but self-absorbed. Egotistical. And okay, yes. They were usually gorgeous to look at. But God, could they be shallow pricks? Kei asked again. Which part were you right about Shoyo? The gay vibe or the not-so-random plop down? Feeling like he'd been played. Shoyo didn't bother with pleasantries as his eyes lingered on Kei. Play your cards right and maybe I'll tell you. Kei didn't acknowledge the comment. He sat in a chair and motioned for Shoyo to sit on the sofa. A bottle and 2 glasses were perfectly placed on the coffee table. Wine? Shoyo sat down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Trying to get me drunk? Kei suppressed a grin. You're not a pushover. I like that. I'm a little jaded. Shoyo stared at Kei intently, trying to read his expression. In other words, trying to figure out why the hell he was there. The house was empty. Dead quiet except for some depressing classical music playing in the background. And so tidy. Shoyo wondered if anyone actually lived there. I don't blame you. Child actor. Smart. A bit of a has-been. 5 minutes off camera and I'm a has-been? Kei offered Shoyo a glass. It's been a year, hasn't it? A hard year. Shoyo took a large sip of wine, almost emptying the glass. Then he tilted his head and frowned. And now I have to wonder how you know that. Surely you have better things to do than to watch soaps all day. It was my mother. Still is actually. So, you didn't grow up watching the soaps with your mom? I was too busy studying and playing the violin. Trying to be the perfect son. Oh, Shoyo seemed to have hit a nerve. He could have commented on how Kei has succeeded by the looks of it. He was perfectly dressed in tan-pressed linen shorts and a light blue fitted V-neck shirt with tan canvas shoes. He sat slightly upright with his legs crossed at his knees. Instead, Shoyo leaned forward and held his glass out for a refill. Nice wine. Glad you like it. Kei filled the glass and resumed his relaxed position. Shoyo noticed a blush working its way up Kei's chest. Probably due to the awkward silence that was. If Shoyo had to guess. Going on 45 seconds now. It looked as though Kei was trying to come up with a good way to say what was really on his mind. Shoyo didn't have time for that. Maybe we could talk about why I'm here? Kei almost seemed relieved by the suggestion. I have a proposition for you. Are you going to save my career? Maybe. Quite possibly. Most likely. He gave a firm nod. Yes. Shoyo didn't hesitate. All of those work for me. I can guarantee you'll get a lot of publicity. What you do with it is completely up to you. Guess I didn't need all that college to figure out Tsukihina introducing himself at Starbucks probably wasn't a random encounter. Shoyo tried to hide his smile by taking a sip of wine. Whatever this was, it was starting to get interesting. Their eyes met for a few seconds. You were right. I don't frequent West Hollywood or even Starbucks. I guess it's just easier to make coffee with my Robo Espresso 3000 or whatever the hell it is. Shoyo looked over his shoulder to where Kei had gestured. And sure enough, there was a rather large stainless steel espresso machine sitting on the counter. He tried not to let his envy show. And it's easier to pretend you're straight when you're not hanging out in West Hollywood? Nah, I just can't deal with the traffic on La Cienega. Kei averted his eyes, killing his chances of selling the joke. Shoyo stared intently at Kei until finally Kei met Shoyo's gaze. He kept himself from grinning with pride at being right. Are you willing to sign a non-disclosure before I make you an offer? Shoyo chuckled. I'm not going to out you if that's what you're asking. Kei slid the non-disclosure contract across the coffee table along with the pin. Shoyo took a look at it and rolled his eyes. With a big sigh he leaned forward and quickly signed on the dotted line. Kei looked at the signature and scowled. Is that really how you sign your name? I never learned to spell. Shoyo quipped. So, you're gay? He immediately regretted asking the question. He could still hear his producers asking him the same thing with a look of horror on their faces. They blamed his firing on wanting to take the storyline in a different direction. But he knew better. He'd been fired for one reason. And one reason only. In about 4 months, I'm going to make a big announcement. He sat his glass on the table and eyed Kei for a moment, trying to decide how much personal information he should divulge. Can I give you some advice? He asked in a serious tone. Only if it's constructive. Stay in the closet. Kei stiffened at the suggestion. I can't. I want a life. That's what I thought too, and then my producers decided I was no longer believable playing a straight man. I've been Brandon fucking Cartwright since I was 10 and all of a sudden I'm no longer believable in that role? I know. Look, like I said before, this is a shitty business. But if you take this offer, maybe the jerks who fired you will regret it. The producers of that show were like my parents. I grew up with them and they turned their backs on me. He took a deep breath, trying to fight back his emotions. Kei gave him a sympathetic smile. I know the feeling. It's amazing how many people are brilliant at pretending they care about you. Right? And we're supposed to be the actors. Kei leaned forward. But one way or another, you're going to need to move on. That's what I've been trying to do. It's the whole reason I'm in LA. Shoyo was losing his patience and the last thing he wanted to do was talk about all the hurt and anger he felt about losing his job. He still didn't know why he was there. For God's sake. So Kei was gay. What the hell does that have to do with him? What's your offer? I'm not going to do this coming out thing willy-nilly. It's going to be a finely tuned show that I control. Smart. Unlike me who went to work one day and said, hey, this is my boyfriend. Aren't you fucking delighted for me? Shoyo dropped his gaze as he relived the awful moment. The fake smiles and the quick change of subject. One of the producers refused to even look him in the eye the rest of the day. It was the beginning of the end of everything. His career, his relationship, all gone now. Shoyo didn't want to cry in front of Kei. In his damn mansion, he might ruin the very soft rug under his feet. My publicist thinks I have a believability issue. It's his somewhat expert opinion that the media, and more importantly the public, will be more sympathetic towards me if I have a boyfriend when I come out. Shoyo raised his head, a look of confusion written all over his face. Wait, what? My publicist. Shoyo put his hand up. No, I heard you. He paused for approximately 400 years. Kei couldn't possibly be suggesting what Shoyo thought he was suggesting. You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend? Yes. Kei nodded his head firmly. I would pay you, of course. We'd start with some photos of us out in public. Not canoodling. Just together having dinner or whatever. They'll be of no interest until I come out. And then, according to Tadashi at least, they'll be fascinating proof that we've been dating. Shoyo let a small laugh slip out of his gaping mouth. Was this man insane? Did he seriously just use the word canoodle? Well, he cleared his throat and put up a finger. There's just one problem. You see, I don't know if I can handle being out in public with the Tsukihina and not canoodle. Kei blushed. Come on. You know what I mean. Yes. I know what you mean and I'm flattered. But I don't think I can do what you're asking. Kei's shoulders straightened, looking surprised by the response. I'm not looking for romance. If that's what you're thinking. And I'm not a prostitute. If that's what you're thinking. Shoyo threw his hands in the air. Why don't you just find the real thing? Start dating. Canoodle all you want. I can't control that. Kei said calmly. Men are crazy. And men in love are even crazier. I don't want any emotion from you. This is a job and I would expect you to treat it as such. Men are crazy? You must have met my ex. Shoyo couldn't believe he was having this conversation. If anyone seemed crazy, it was Kei. Shoyo put his face in his hands and rubbed his forehead. Desperate for a paying gig. He tried to ignore how ludicrous the idea seemed to be. What are the terms? Steady pay for a year. You'll be where I ask. When I ask. There will be some wardrobe considerations, of course. And anything you say publicly will be tightly controlled. Most importantly, you act. I hear you're not half bad. You hear. Feeling completely insulted, Shoyo's voice raised a couple of octaves. You've never even seen my work and you're offering me a job? I trust Tadashi's opinion on that. Sure. Publicist. Casting director. What's the difference really? Shoyo had imagined any number of scenarios on the drive to Palisades. This craziness wasn't one of them. Do you want the job or not? This was insane. Did people really do this? Shoyo grabbed his jacket and stood up. No, I don't. Kei also stood up. But, you need the work. Kei was trying not to shout. Not this kind of work. Kei's expression turned from confusion to anger. You're above this. Is that it? Because being a soap star is so admirable? I'm an actor, Shoyo said, pointing at himself. And on top of that, I'm well educated. Shoyo crossed his arms over his chest. Furious he'd braved the LA traffic for this nonsense. This is just bullshit. Kei remained calm, even though Shoyo was practically yelling at him. Bullshit? So tell me, Shoyo, what was your last storyline before you got fired? No, let me guess. You were playing Brandon fucking Cartwright and his long-lost evil twin? Shoyo held Kei's stare, his eyes full of anger. He was fuming and damn near burning Kei with his glare. At least that's how it felt until he burst out laughing. Oh God, my TV wife couldn't tell us apart. They had me doing so many love scenes with her. Who knows? Maybe I really wasn't that believable anymore. As if believability is what the writers were ever going for on that show. He dropped his jacket, sat back down and grabbed the bottle of wine, pouring the last of it into his glass. He took a sip, his hands shaking slightly. Kei also sat down and picked up his glass. Well, if it makes you feel any better, my mother would probably be thrilled if I brought you home. As my friend, of course. Shoyo looked up in surprise. Your mom doesn't know you're gay? No, not yet. God, what a mess. Shoyo groaned at himself. He should have left the moment Kei revealed his intentions. So why was he still sitting here? Sure, he needed the money, but not that badly. As for the fame, he was no Kei. But he still had his fans. Plenty of them. And yet he was still here actually considering this absurdity. I take it I'll be playing the part of the dumped ex-boyfriend eventually? Yes. We'll break up and we'll both move on. Everyone will know your name and I'll start dating. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll even find the real thing one day. It's a win-win. And what do we tell the people close to us? You start now. Tell them you met me and I was super nice. So I'd be acting right off the bat? Kei's eyes widened in surprise. Shoyo set the wine glass back down. If he kept drinking, he wouldn't be able to drive back down the steep hairpin curve road that brought him here. Sorry. You caught me on a bad week and this whole thing just reeks of everything I hate about this business. Shoyo looked at the ceiling and shook his head. Unable to believe he was actually considering this. If I take this job, As you call it. Where will I live? There's a guest house out back. I'd prefer it if you stayed there so we can control the paparazzi. My home is very secure. The backyard is private and there's a side gate so you can come and go as you please. I think you'd be quite comfortable here. The only thing I ask is that you don't bring any guests here. Shoyo stood and walked over to the world's largest window. It was getting dark, but he could easily see a long lighted pool that looked like it poured over a cliff and into the ocean. A sleek modern-looking guest house sat off to one side and a fire pit set in the opposite corner. As for the neighbors, if there were any, you'd never know it. The property was lined with tall narrow evergreens that created an impressive privacy hedge on each side. Compared to his tiny hotel room in West Hollywood, this would feel like paradise. And Kay hadn't said Shoyo couldn't keep looking for real acting jobs. It wouldn't be so bad. Would it? He could swallow his damn pride for once. Couldn't he? Shoyo turned back around and folded his arms. I want everything in writing. I want an early termination bonus in case you decide you don't like me and change your mind. Also, I want to be able to keep auditioning. Kay stood up. I already don't like you, Shoyo. You have that New York bullshit attitude that rubs me the wrong way. But my publicist tells me you're a hell of an actor and that's what I need on my arm. The fact that I would never consider dating you is probably a good thing. Shoyo went back over to the sofa and grabbed his jacket. Fuck you too. And tell your publicist I want an advance. He said, walking to the door. And a car. A nice one. He shouted over his shoulder. Kay followed Shoyo to the door. Do you think I'd let my boyfriend drive a? Kay looked out at the driveway. What is that? A Hyundai? It's a Sonata. Thank you very much. The fancy kind of Hyundai. Kay laughed. Aha. Shoyo gave him a sarcastic scowl. He stepped out of the house and glanced at the white Maserati sitting in the driveway. I prefer black. Of course you do. Kay muttered under his breath. He watched Shoyo walk over to his car. And watch my fucking show. Shoyo yelled as he climbed into his rental car and slammed the door. Kay gave him a little wave. Smiling like he hadn't heard that last request. Shoyo put the key in the ignition and whispered. What have I gotten myself into?